Okay, Bezos Hashem. Today's daf is Masechta Bava Metzia Daf Yud Dalet. But I want to begin just to go over the Mishnah, which is on Daf Yud Beis Amud Beis. So we've been discussing this Mishnah, so we should have it very clear. When you borrow money, the lender has a right to foreclose on the property. That's clear. A lender has a right to foreclose on property. So what happens when you find motza shitrei choiv? The Mishnah says if you find a loan document, so now the potential is who you're going to return it to the lender or to the borrower. So our Mishnah says that a Mishnah is talking about where the borrower agrees that he has this loan outstanding. Okay, he still owes the money. So the Mishnah qualifies this. Rab Meir qualifies this and says, "Im yesh behen achrayis nechasim." If in the document there's a possibility of giving the right to the lender to foreclose properties that the borrower sold, lo yachzer, don't return it to the lender. Now, why is the question? Why is that? So the answer is because Bezdin may foreclose on a property, and it could be we're concerned that maybe the loan was paid up. Okay, imagine the loan being paid up. So why is the borrower saying I still owe this money? Because he wants the lender to foreclose on a property that he sold, and then they'll split it behind everybody's back. So therefore, since this shtar choiv was found in the street, normally a shtar choiv is not found in the street. So therefore, don't return it to the lender. But if there's no possibility for the lender to foreclose on properties, because in the loan document, it doesn't say they could foreclose on the property, yachser, then you can return it, because at the end of the day, the lender is not going to foreclose on the property because it's missing in the document. Chacham says, no matter what, even if it's not written in the loan document, giving the lender to foreclose on property sold, lo yachzer, you don't return it to the lender. Why? Because Bezdin will foreclose on a property. Because the Chachamim hold, and this is the important point of today, the Chachamim hold that even though it's left out in the loan document that giving the lender to foreclose on properties, we consider that as if it's a mistake on the scribe, and the lender still has a right to foreclose on a property. So that's the point. Amar Shmuel, we begin on Daf Yudalit Amar Aleph, about 1/3 from about like 8-9 lines from the top. Amar Shmuel said, let's make it bigger. Amar Shmuel said, my Tama the Rabbanan. What's the reason the Rabbanan hold that if it's not written in the property no matter what, you should not return this loan document that you found to the lender? Because Sabri, they hold achrayas toy cipher here. Even though it's not written that the lender could foreclose on property, but that's considered a mistake of the scribe. But the lender still has that right to foreclose on a property. So therefore, the Rabbanan said, don't return the loan document to the lender, because we're afraid the lender and the borrower are in collusion. The borrower is going to say, I still owe this money. The lender is now going to foreclose on properties that the borrower sold because the borrower has no money to pay. And then when he forecloses on those properties, he's going to split the property with the borrower because he helped him collect this property. So therefore, don't return it. The Rabbanan are very strict. Don't return this loan document to the lender. Amalei Rava bar Iti Rav Idi bar Avim. So Rava bar Iti said to Rav Idi bar Avim, Umi Shmuel Hachi. Did Shmuel say such a thing? Did Shmuel say that even if it's left out of a document, we automatically assume that a lender has a right to foreclose on properties? Is that true? Shmuel says, a man is selling a property. Okay, this is different. You're not lending money, but if you're selling a property, and there's no title insurance, right? So the purchaser may be requesting from the seller that he guarantees that it's not going to be foreclosed, on him because of an outstanding loan, and in case it does become foreclosed on him, he has to pay the purchaser shavach, the improvements on of what he made on the property. Let's say the purchaser already put up a fence, and then his property got foreclosed on him. Now, and the one that foreclosed on the property claims that he also made a fence and was taken down, and therefore, so he foreclosed on the property. Now the purchaser wants to get his money back from the seller. So shvach, the improvements that he made on the property, shvar v'shibud, sarach v'shav v'shibud, and the responsibility to actually guarantee a sale, actually guarantee a sale and guarantee the sale. That the purchaser has a right to collect back in case the property is foreclosed on from his best properties. So all those conditions, if a scribe is writing up a contract of sale, before he puts those conditions and a responsibility on the seller, you have to ask the seller if he agrees with that. Some sellers will agree to guarantee just the property. Some sellers will guarantee the property plus improvements, and some sellers will not guarantee that you can collect from his best properties in case it's foreclosed on. He'll only guarantee if on his mediocre properties. So we see that Shmuel says that a scribe that leaves out those conditions, not by mistake, it's actually on purpose, because before he includes the right to foreclose on a property, he has to ask the one taking on that responsibility, which this case would be the seller of a field, if he wants to agree to that. So the Gemara says, Lema, would you say, Man the Amaha, like Amaha, the one that said that Achrayas to is Sofer, that Shmuel, is not the same Shmuel that says that Achrayas is not the mistake of the scribe, but the scribe either on purpose leaves these things out. So is there a machloikis in what Shmuel said? So the Gemara squares it off very simply and says, Loi kasha, there's no difficulty. Kan b'shtar hava. A loan document automatically includes giving the right to the lender to foreclose on a property. Why? Very simple. The Gemara says that when you lend somebody's money, you don't want to be left with no way to collect on that loan. So therefore, you automatically want to collect on that loan, even to foreclose on property sold after the loan date. Now, a person will not lend his money for nothing, with no security. So therefore, if it's left out by the soifer giving the right to lender to foreclose on the property, we assume that that's a mistake, that the lender still has the right to foreclose on a property. But by a sale, if it's left out of a deed of sale, a man sold a field to his friend, and he didn't guarantee that nobody's going to foreclose on the property of the purchaser, and it doesn't say in the document that the purchaser has a right to collect back from the seller from his assets, from his sold property, then he doesn't have the right to do so. Why? Because the purchaser is okay with buying a property even though it's non-contingent. There's no onus on the seller to guarantee that his property will not be foreclosed upon. In other words, a person will buy a property even without title insurance. A person will buy a property, and even if he told people foreclose on a property, it takes months through the court system, and he'll benefit from it. And therefore, he's willing to take that risk to buy a property without giving him the right, without title insurance, giving him the right to go after the seller in case the property is foreclosed on. So therefore, if that's left out of a sale document, then it's considered on purpose left out in the sale document. And the Gemara gives a story, like the following story: Avuhu bar Ihi zoven ilise ma'achse. Avuhu bar Ihi bought a beautiful property from his sister. Okay, no. So he thought he got a good deal, right? He buys something from his sister. Asa bal chayv, so the creditor of his sister came, tarfamine, foreclosed on the property. So now he wants to go after his sister. No fight like a family fight. So he wants to go after his sisters and collect on and foreclose on her properties that she sold elsewhere to get back the money that he just purchased from his from a property from his sister. Also, they commented on Shmuel, so they came in front of Shmuel, Amallah. He said, Kostala Achrayis isn't written in your contract of sale when you bought your property from your sister that you have a right. I mean, basically, that she's guaranteeing that the property, if in the event of foreclosure, that you'll be able to go after her. Did she take on that responsibility? Amalei, loy. So the Abu Bar said, no, it's not written in the document. Amalei, so Shmuel said, Im Kain, if so, Zil Lishlama, go in peace. You lost your money. Amalei, so he jumped up Abu Abahu. V'amarhu, didn't you say, Shmuel, the Ama Achrayis Toy Sefer, that if it's left out, that clause giving me the right to take my purchase the seller to court and collect back the money, if it's even though it's not written in the document, it's a Toy Sefer. It's a mistake of the scribe. So Amalei, so Shmuel explained, Hani Mili B'Shter Halva. In a loan document, if that's not written there, then it's a mistake of the scribe, and still the lender has a right to foreclose on properties. But a regular contract of sale, no, then we don't say. Why? The Ovid Inish, the Zovan Arli, because purchasers buy fields, buy property, even though there is no title insurance, even though in case it's foreclosed on, they won't have the right to collect. So if it's left out of a contract of sale, then it's on purposely left out, and you don't have the right to collect from your sister from her assets. From her assets. Amar Abaya said, a new story. Reuven shamocha sada l'Shimon b'Achrayis. Reuven sold a property, a field, to Shimon, and he took responsibility that in case somebody forecloses on Shimon, Reuven will make Shimon whole. Uva bal choyev de Reuven, and a creditor of Reuven came. The Kotarif Leminei and already started a lawsuit to start the process to foreclose on the field of Shimon. Now, really, Reuven's left out of the whole thing because Reuven sold the property to Shimon. So, Dina hu da azal Reuven umishtoi Dina badai. Really, Reuven has a right to enter the courtroom, and maybe he even should enter the courtroom and take the case on and protect himself from the foreclosing on Shimon. Perhaps Reuven has what to say to this case, and maybe the person will back away from his lawsuit and foreclosure process because he'll realize, the creditor will realize, I can't take Reuven on because Reuven knows that he paid the outstanding loan. So Reuven has a right to enter the court. But the creditor can say to Reuven, La bal you have nothing to do with this matter. I'm just foreclosing on a property belonging to Shimon, not to you. Because Reuven said, the mafkit b'nei, but once you foreclose on the property from Shimon, alai didi hadar. I'm responsible to make Shimon whole. So therefore, I'm entering this courtroom. So the first version is that only if Reuven sold the field to Shimon with Achrayis, where he's taken on the responsibility and he gave title insurance to Shimon. But what happens if he didn't? Then Reuven has no right to enter the courtroom. But Ika de Amre, others say, even if Reuven did not take on the responsibility to make Shimon whole in case he did not offer title insurance, Shimon, nevertheless, Reuven could enter the courtroom and defend Shimon from the foreclosure process. Because Reuven can say, I don't want to have Shimon have any complaints against me in case the property is stolen, taken out from Shimon, foreclosed on Shimon. And although Shimon cannot go back to Reuven and say, oh, you make me whole, because Reuven did not add the clause of Achrayis, but Shimon still will call Reuven a Ganav. So Reuven doesn't want that to happen. So Reuven could enter the courtroom, and the Baal Choiv cannot say, you're not the one that I am taking on. I have nothing to do with you. Zok the Gemara, the Amar Abaya, and Abaya said another thing. Reuven shemochar sada l'Shimon. Reuven that sells a field to Shimon shloi b'achrayis without taking on the responsibility, without title insurance. Reuven sold the field to Shimon. V'yotza aleh asikim, and what happened? Rumors came out. Now people said, "Oh, Reuven, either that field that he sold to Shimon is eventually going to be foreclosed upon." So then, now Shimon did not yet pay money to Reuven for the field, but now here Shimon says, "I'm buying a property. It might come that somebody's going to foreclose on the property. Why should I pay Reuven for this money?" So the Gemara says, "Ad shaloi hechzik ba," until Shimon actually did show ownership on that field. So therefore, he didn't acquire the field yet, because in order to acquire a field is actually if you demonstrate ownership. So therefore, we go to Amid Beis, Yochol Lachsaboy. That until that happens, Reuven and Shimon can back out of the sale that Reuven wants to do, because he didn't show ownership of it. He didn't make a kinyan on the karka. But if he demonstrated ownership on the property, so he actually acquired the field, now he owes the money. So then, even though there's rumors now that this field is eventually going to be foreclosed upon, he still has to pay Reuven the money. You cannot back out of that purchase. Because Reuven will tell him, you bought a sack that's full of nuts. That means you didn't investigate further into the purchase. So that's not my fault. I sold you the property. I didn't misrepresent anything. You didn't ask me. So therefore, you still have to pay me the money. Now, so you still have to pay me the money. And if it gets foreclosed, fine, man, we're talking about that. Too bad. I didn't take responsibility on that. Again, the buyer beware. Now, the Gemara asks the question, what is called showing ownership? What is called showing ownership on a property? How do you know that you own a property? Michidayesh amitzri. When you lift the borders of the gate around the property and you install a better one. So somehow, if you demonstrate, you fix up the protection of the property, that's called a chazaka. And therefore, once you did chazaka, you own the property. Shimon now owns the property, and therefore he has to pay up, despite the fact that he heard rumors that this property is going to be foreclosed upon, and he might lose his entire investment. The Ikad others say, nami. Even if Reuven guaranteed, gave title insurance, so therefore, it's eventually, even if it gets foreclosed upon, Shimon's not nervous. He'll be able to collect the money back from Reuven. So why can't he tell Reuven, listen, I hear these rumors, let me back out, because even if I get foreclosed upon, I'm coming back to you for the money. So let's call the sale off. So Reuven can say the sale is not off. The Amalei achvei tarpach v'shamlach. Show me that it was foreclosed upon you, and then I'll pay you. Because these things take time in court. Not so simple to foreclose on a property. And therefore, the sale is ongoing. And if it eventually gets foreclosed upon, yes, I'll make you whole. But up until then, you're still responsible to pay me the money, because you showed chazak in this property and you consummated an ownership of the property, so I'm not responsible. Itmar, now we have a teaching. New teaching. A man sells a field to his friend. Okay, and it turns out it's not his field. Okay, a chutzpah. He sold the field. He sold you the Brooklyn Bridge. Okay, and it's not his. Rav says you could go back to the guy that stole it, because the nigzal, the one that's the victim, he's going to get his field back. So now the purchaser wants to go back to the Goslin and get his money back. Rav says yesh loy mois, you get your money back, but yesh loy shvach. And even if the purchaser put in improvements in the field, right, and the nigzal foreclosed on that, because the nigzal claimed that the Goslin stole the field, and there was improvements on the field, and the Goslin wrecked it up, sold it to you, you did back the improvements. So the nigzal is not going to pay for the improvements, because he claims that when it was originally stolen, there was improvements on the field. So now the purchaser going back to the Goslin and said, pay me for the improvements. Rav says the Goslin has to pay for the improvements. Shmuel says, mois yesh loy, shvach ein loy. You could go back to the Goslin to get your money back, but you can't get back the improvements that you did on the property. Now we're going to explain why that should be. Boy, my name Rav Huna. So they asked Rav Huna, Pirish loy es hashvach, if when the Goslin sold the field to the purchaser, and he said, I guarantee you that even if you improve upon the field, and it gets foreclosed and taken away from you, I'll pay you back for the shvach. So would you say that even according to Shmuel, the Gazlan has to pay for shvach? Because we're going to say like this: Talmud de Shmuel. What's the reason why Shmuel says the Gazlan does not have to pay for the improvements to the purchaser? Because he didn't say that in his deed of sale. But if he did, then the Gazlan is responsible to pay back the purchaser for improvements that he made on the field. Or Dilma, maybe Talmud de Shmuel kivi de les le karka mechsek ribis. Beautiful. When the Gazlan sold that field that didn't belong to him, so basically, when the purchaser gave him the money, that really was a loan because he sold him nothing. He sold him the Brooklyn Bridge. So when the Gazlan got that money, it's almost like the Gazlan got a loan. So now the Gazlan, when the purchaser says, "Oh, now pay me back," if the Gazlan pays back the purchase price plus improvements, it looks like ribas. It looks like interest, and anything that looks like interest, you're not allowed to pay. So therefore, the Gazlan gets off easy and will not have to pay for the improvements. So what's the din? Because Malay in the lav, so they asked the question for Mahuna, and he wasn't sure. He said sometimes yes, you pay for the improvements, and not pay for the improvements when it's explicitly written. Rafya bidei, it was not clear in his hand. Itmar, but we did learn. Amarav, Rav Nachman Amashmur. Rav Nachman said in the name of Shmuel, Mois yesh loy shvach ein loy, that you do pay for the improvements. You don't pay for the improvements. Why? Even though you said you're going to, even if the Gazlan guaranteed that he's going to pay for the improvements, he will not be responsible for the improvements. My tama, because Kivan the karka eloy, since this land didn't belong, he sold the Brooklyn Bridge. So basically, when he received money, it was basically a loan. A loan. So if a loan, you pay back exactly what you borrowed. The purchaser takes his money back, but cannot take back improvements because it looks the Gazlan, by giving more money to the purchaser, it's as if he's giving him ribbis. So therefore, he gets off easy. The Gemara asks one question. Esvei Rav Rav Nachman. So Rav asked the question to Rav Nachman. There's a Mishnah that says, Ein Metzia lachilas peres u'lishvach kakois. Let's ignore that part of the Mishnah. But you don't foreclose on properties. You can't go foreclose on properties. Let's say a husband is owed his wife mezainis, food, or for his daughter's food, right? And he's not around, and they can't. The wife and the daughters cannot go to menuchasim mishubadim to foreclose on that. Because the husband took responsibility in his ksuba to give them mezainis. Why? Because nobody's going to want to buy a property. Because if you know that you have unlimited liability, because you don't know how much, after a man dies, you don't know how much liability he has to support his wife with food or his daughters with food. So therefore, the Chachamim said that the woman holding the ksuba will not be able to foreclose on properties her deceased husband sold to get back money so she can have food, because we want people to buy land and not have the risk of something of a unlimited liability on the land. So we darshan a woman cannot go after foreclose on properties that were sold. But if there's freestanding properties in the estate, then you would be able to foreclose on that. Now, let's go back to ushvach karkois. What does it mean? You're allowed to go after improvements. L'shvach karkois. What does it mean? Who's going after improvements? Who's foreclosing? Who's going after freestanding property to somebody who owes money for improvements on somebody that made on his property? My love, it must be talking about belekech megazlan, that a purchaser bought a property from a crook, and then it was taken away from him. So he's going after the Gazlan, not only to get his money back, but he wants to get improvements that he made on the property. So we see that you do get improvements on a property, and this is a Mishnah. So you could actually, the purchaser could go after the Gazlan for shvach, for improvements. And this is against Shmuel. Shmuel said shvach ein loy, because it looks like ribbis. So the Gemara says loy, it's not talking about a purchaser from a Gazlan. It's a regular Baal Chayv. A guy sold his field that really belonged to him, but his creditor foreclosed on the property. So not only can you go after the person that sold you the property for the purchase price, but you could also go after for improvements that you made on the property. And that's given. A Baal Chayv can go after the shvach, because that doesn't look like ribis at all, because everybody knows that's a regular deed of sale, because the actual land belonged to the seller. Iba Baal Chayv, if it's talking about a Baal Chayv, let's take a look at the beginning of the Mishnah. It says you don't go foreclose for eating of fruits. The Iba Baal Chayv mi islay pera. What does it mean? That if what happens, a Baal Chayv, a creditor foreclosed on a property that had regular fruits on it, let's say that were about to be picked, so then you could go after the seller of the property to get your fruits back. But that only presumes that the creditor had a right to go after a property, foreclose on the property, and keep the fruits. But Shmuel said, the creditor, goyve as a shvach, can only foreclose on improvements on the property, shvach en, but aval peres loy. But if there's fruits that are about to be ripened, he cannot foreclose on that. So how is that the beginning of the brayso? The beginning of the Mishnah talking about a Baal Chayv. Ela Pshita, it must be that the beginning of the Mishnah is the Goizel of a Nigzal. It's talking about a crook and a Nigzal, where the Nigzal claims that the Gazlan stole his field, which had these fruits on it. So when the Nigzal takes it back, he's taking back the field and the fruits. So that's this part. So if that's the ratio of the beginning is talking about a Gazlan and Nigzal, then this Shvach Kakois also could be talking about a Goizel V'Nigzal, and we see that you could go after the Shvach, not like Shmuel. So the Gemara says, Midi Iri, who says it? So, Hakadisa. You can have two different cases in the Mishnah. First case of the Mishnah is talking about a Gazlan and Nigzal, and the second case of the Mishnah is talking about a Baal Chayv. So one last question, half a minute. But the Bryce that explains the Mishnah doesn't agree with that. The Bryce explains the Mishnah. If you steal a field from your friend, and someone foreclosed on that field, when you collect it, you could collect. Hey, Kadami, what's that talking about? If you just say Gazlan got his field taken away. The guy stole a field and the Nigzal took it away. What's he trying to collect? He didn't have the field doesn't belong to him anyway. It must be the Bryce talking about Kagon Shagozel, so the Mechavera. He actually stole, and it was missing the word Chavera. You see? Kagozel saw the Mechavera, he stole it. Oh, it does say it stole it for Umachra. It's missing the word Umachra, and he sold to somebody else. And it says that this guy, the purchaser, could go after the Gazlan not only for the item for the item itself, for the karen, but he could also go after the shvach, not like Shmuel. So the Bryce disagrees with Shmuel. Amalei. So this is the answer, and we'll end with here. Lav terutzi komataratz. Didn't we? You have to put in words into this Bryce. You have to put it in umachar la'achar. So tiritz name Baal Chayv. Change the word shagozal. It's a regular Baal Chayv being collecting, and for Baal Chayv, actually you could collect from the seller, not the shvach, not and it's not talking about a Gazlan and that was a guy who purchased from a Gazlan. Okay, this ended.
Shkar, thank you.
Okay. Good night, everybody.
Good night. Good night. Thank you. Have a good